The power of a rumor is unbelievable. I'm overlooking Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where the story begins.
I'm not standing on a corner in Arizona, but it's still a terrifying sight to see. I got 7 women tracking me, but I said only one is my sworn enemy. Vampirism is the poster shit. Hide your wife and hide your kids. It's kinda like if you didn't know who Osama bin Laden is, you probably just think it's weird that the dudes who did 9/11 all had matching beards.
I am a brother, a son, community member. More importantly to me, I am a stand-up comedian and musician. I've done a short-length documentary on the psychedelic drug ibogaine, utilized to treat addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder. Today, I bring you a story that makes Jodi Arias and the U.S. Marshal that framed his ex-girlfriend look like a G-rated Disney movie while you're watching it with your conservative grandparents. This story happened where I grew up, standing in front of the Nazareth area high school in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. I went to high school here. I grew up here. It's a great place to live. I don't get into identity politics, but I am a Blue Eagle. There isn't a great way to jump into the dark world of narcissistic personality disorder and this sadistic, pedophilic terrorism group. I was trying to do this intro and my hands started shaking, reliving some of these events. So I did my best in this documentary to highlight what happened to me to prevent it happening to another human being. 85% of the people human trafficked in America are women and children. When you go through this documentary, I want you to imagine a woman or child going through these events. I also want to set the stage. So I was groomed by a female narcissistic woman. And the key feature of narcissism, whether it's a male or a female, and about 4.8% of the population is narcissistic personality disorder. That means they have a disorder that's probably coexisting with other psychological pathologies, such as in women, it's borderline personality disorder,
which is an extreme fear of abandonment. When little girls don't have a father, they physically go through puberty at a quicker rate than other females. Why? Because they need the male attention. Why? So they can survive. This means developing extreme manipulation tactics and their ability to seduce and mirror body language and essentially get male attention and have obsessive, toxic relationships is a given. And this is a death sentence for most women with BPD and MPD combined. A lot of them commit suicide. They never have stable relationships. And they can tell you exactly what they need to do. And you're like, this person's brilliant. But they can't implement these goals in their life. And for males that have narcissistic personality disorder, it's essentially they're predators. They are extreme predators that lack empathy, and they're just using women. So this documentary is to illuminate this dark world and to inform people that this is happening in your local community. Human trafficking, pedophilia, child abuse, and setting the stage for this documentary, however painful it is for me to relive this. In 2024, I went to one of two baby daddies of the mom of Nazareth, who happened to be my neighbor. And I walked up and I dropped off all the children's food, Lunchables and shit like that. And I said, I think your child's being abused. And it certainly is not being encouraged. And I'm witnessing this and I'm rubbing his back going, I don't know why this is happening. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what's wrong with your mom. I don't see anything wrong with you. I would bring the children to my lake house and I'd be swimming with them. And the mom of Nazareth would call her son gay, autistic. Meanwhile, I don't think there's anything wrong with her sons. A lot of times the narcissistic female will abuse her children in the following way. One person is the golden child, usually the youngest, and the oldest is the victim. They take all their anger out on the oldest. And it's horror. It's truly horror. So much so, I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to deal with the problem. I called CPS. I didn't follow up. I often think maybe this wouldn't have happened if I just would have followed up. So if you're watching this documentary and you think there's child abuse going on, call CPS, call local police, call the FBI. It doesn't matter. Get the word out. Make sure the child is safe. Moreover, if you have a friend in a toxic relationship, get them out of their relationship. The key feature of narcissistic personality disorder is discard. So discard means treating the person like trash and throwing them away like a piece of trash. That's part of narcissistic personality disorder. And if you think female narcissists, think of Poison Ivy, literally just killing men. That's what she does in like the Batman or Robin movie. These narcissistic personality disorder is archetypal in both males and females. It's the Joker. It's the Riddler. These horror themed villains are horror themed villains for a reason. They're based off of narcissistic personality and psychopathic personality disorders. It's what it is. And it's not a major percentage, but these people don't even feel empathy. They don't have empathy, and it's very dangerous. Another part of this narcissistic personality disorder is the grandiose, self-centered, and selfish point of view. You can't even fathom someone having this MPD or BPD complex. They are the kings and queens of the land, and if you don't reflect back to them this delusional reality, well, you're in trouble. You're in big trouble. And if you don't comply, it creates a narcissistic injury. A narcissistic injury generates a need for control. Why? They have to regain control because they're shamed as a little girl or a little boy. And to never feel this shame again, they present the stage character to the world. And you're simply just an actor. They're the director. And you're just simply an actor. Do as I say, do as I please. You're here to serve me, and that's about it. If you challenge the narcissist in a narcissistic injury, they may go into narcissistic collapse. This is the most dangerous and unpredictable part of narcissism. You have no idea what's going to happen next, but you're in trouble. If it's malignant narcissism, call CPS and run. That's what I did. And this story will start in 2025 when I received a phone call from the mom in Nazareth while I was in Mexico receiving ibogaine treatment. She told me she was raped in front of her son. She said her youngest son said, "Where's mommy's pants?" In the back of my mind, I felt really sad for her, but I had stuff going on. I didn't talk to her when I got back. It was in the back of my head. I said, "Hey, we can start talking again." Meanwhile, I have a successful relationship with another person, but in my mind, I go, well, we were intimate with each other, and she might be in a really bad spot, so I'm going to continue to talk to her. And it was toxic both ways. And March 13th and 14th, 2026 comes along. She brings me to a bar, and the sexual assault occurs. Meanwhile, she's destroying my life for 11 years, groomed me since I was 22. I'm 32 now. So this is the final discard. After she robbed everything from me, we'll get into the whole story. But this is what people need to know about the sexual assault. The tactics I'm not going to get into. It's a national security threat for real. If people find out this information, it's horrible what these people know. And they also group. So the sexual assault, I was in a confined space with this woman, and they use contradictory messages, such as, I was really angry with her because she told me she was raped and went down an alley with some guy. The setup is reject the person as long as they possibly can, give them as much pain as possible. And then when you're in a confined space, touch them inappropriately, and you basically go through this procedure. It's a manipulation procedure, and it's textbook sexual assault. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but it's contradictory messages and emotional abuse during the sexual process. And then the final trick occurs, and my body went into a traumatic shock. That's when you're in the fight, flight, or freeze mode. My body chose freeze because I knew this person for 11 years. I had no idea she was going to do this. And meanwhile, she's cold-bloodedly calculating my suicide. Predator. Just a total predator. And after the sexual assault, I knew something was fucked up with me. Just fucked up. My brain could not stop thinking about her. And I go, why am I obsessed with a dead? What the fuck is going on? It fucked me up. The worst thing you could do to someone is sexual victimization. It totally fucks you up. It fucks you up bad. If you go into traumatic shock, you have to report that. Most people black it out. I blacked it out for 3 weeks. After the 3 weeks, I called a crime victims unit, a rape hotline. I said, I don't know what the fuck is going on with me. And that's pretty much when the cyber terrorism started.
I'm currently standing outside of the Bethlehem Police Department on New Street, where I originally reported the sexual assault, and I had no clue what I was doing. Originally, I called a crime victims unit rape hotline, which provided me a counselor to meet and directly report the sexual assault to law enforcement. I, unfortunately, went to the Bethlehem Township Police Department outside the jurisdiction of where this crime originally happened. From there, I was followed by a random person in a car, which I thought was unrelated, but looked worried and confused, and was on the phone while I go into the township building. They redirected me to the police department here on New Street, where I was met by Officer Gonzalez, and I had a crime victims unit counselor with me. And during this police report, the officer gave me so much grief where he said, why didn't you even report this? Why are you reporting it 3 weeks after the assault? The crime victims counselor had to chime in on my behalf and said, this is common. This is actually status quo for a sexual assault. But for some reason, I was instantly met with grief, and they gave me a hard time from the get-go. So, when you're pushed back upon law enforcement, when you do everything right, you're doing it by the book, the goal is to advocate for yourself and continue to advocate for your life, because the predators are one step ahead of local law enforcement, especially during cyber terrorism attacks, especially during sexual assaults. Women in 2026 don't stand a chance. These tactics are criminally designed to avoid law enforcement detection. Currently standing in between the Bethlehem Police Station and the Bethlehem Public Library and City Hall. This is where I initially started bouncing between the library and the police station, trying to understand cyber terrorism. Here are the basic symptoms without breaching national security. Cyber terrorism, in my case, started with an account named primal.cat. And this account was messaging me, eliciting psychosomatic symptoms of the sexual assault. There are symptoms that occur after a sexual assault. I'm not going to get into them due to security issues. So what does cyber terrorism look like, and how does it start? It starts as a minor inconvenience. Why? This is a psychological tactic to essentially map your psyche out. Are you going to report it? How is he going to respond? And we're going to start light. Initially, what the cyber terrorist did was delete all of my contacts on my phone and essentially start sending me different vague messages on Instagram threads. Why is this important? Well, deleting all of a person's contacts creates an isolation effect. How many phone numbers do you personally know, memorize by heart? Probably not many. And while I was surveilling the St. Luke's Hospital, I noticed doctors glued to their phones as they walk into work. If you notice, police officers, before they get into the departments, doesn't matter where you're at, they're all looking at their phones down. Why is this also important? It's because when you look at professional occupations throughout the United States, they are being hijacked by the addictiveness of a cell phone. That plays a major role in what cyber terrorists can get away with. And there's a vagueness to it. So people have plausible deniability, which means, no, I didn't really mean this. I meant this over here. You got me all wrong. I'm an innocent victim. So the cyber terrorism started, and then the messages got more and more personal. I had to relearn how to walk due to an accident in my early 20s. And only a handful of people knew this, including my sexual assailant. Looking back, to be victim of a cyber terrorism attack, you don't put two and two together. You don't think, wow, they must have had all my personal information for a very long time. What I did personally was pass it off. I rationalized, well, it can't be that bad. It's just this crazy chick and she's trying to mess with my head. Initially, that's what I thought. And to highlight what this actually looks like, I'm going to briefly provide documentation from when the cyber terrorism started. These were fake accounts using different personalities, if you will, different tones, similar to the sexual assault. Because during a sexual assault, and again, to avoid national security risks, the assailant uses different tones of voice. Am I going to be an authoritative? Am I going to be a lover? They use this in a very technical and effective way to cause confusion and elicit emotional response.
Welcome to Poker Towns, and he ends for the snakes that destroy themselves. You can tell by the sex, this flop has a controlling complex. Here's a tarot card as she starts thinking. Snake eyes a baby. Darbo in the morning. This river card reminds me of something corny. Is this a bluff fight between the sex and the plight? How can you tell when her poker tells aren't
after a victim is sexually assaulted, the victim goes into a very vulnerable state of mind, emotional state, spiritual state, and physical state. Everything's affected. And the purpose of having different anonymous accounts reaching out, eliciting response in different tones, stating that they're in another country when their Instagram account says they're in the United States, adds fuel for an obsession quality. Why is this important? Well, human traffickers know this. They know, pretty much everyone knows, that men and women like mystery with a partner. If you tell them everything about yourself, that's weird. And narcissists know this to an extreme absurd level. They try and fuel obsession as much as they can, so they study it. They study the psychological components. So having different accounts harassing me and eliciting fear response adds to attraction. There was a study done where an attractive woman asks men to fill out a survey and provides her number to the men involved in this experiment. And she stopped men on a wobbly bridge right in the middle of it and provided her phone number. And she also did the experiment on a park bench. What researchers found out was extraordinary. The men that were stopped on the wobbly bridge called the woman 8 times, 7 times, or 8 times more than the men on the park bench. Why? Because when you are in a state of fear and adrenaline response on a wobbly bridge where you could fall, your brain tricks itself and has to label the emotion. So they put it to this attractive woman. The people on the park bench didn't have this phenomenon. Women who drive on the back of a man's motorcycle notice this as well. There's mystery, there's fear, there's adrenaline, and your brain has nowhere to put this except on the human being. Due to, evolutionarily speaking, we need to reproduce. Humans need to reproduce. That's paramount. So that's what happens when there's a fuel for obsession. Fake accounts, cyber terrorism, sexual assault. No one's believing me. That creates the cyber terrorist's wet dream, so to speak, to elicit maximum emotional response from the victim. I'm standing at the Boyd apartment complex in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And my neighbor at this time period of being cyber terrorized, my numbers are deleted, bank accounts, all the passwords are deleted. Again, this is a gradual, one step at a time, psychological operation in reverse titrated fashion to slowly get you accustomed to the extreme terrorism and abuse. My neighbor in 222 who I've never met before, ever, greets me and wants me to smoke weed with him. I told him the first time I'm not 12 years old. I don't smoke weed. He grinds me and basically wears me down to the point where he takes me outside, eventually, approximately 2.5 weeks after the sexual assault, right at this location. And after I take a hit of his bong, he then states, "You're going to need to see a priest." I was weirded out. I said, "What are you talking, priest? What are you talking about?" "You got to go to this church. It's the only thing that's going to save you. You have to go see a priest." This was an ominous warning and a telltale sign of how this terroristic, cyber-connected, pedophilic narcissism group works. And what happens reveals and illuminates the exact process of why that statement, "You need to see a priest," was so important and critical to this case. At this stage of the cyber terrorism attack, I call it the diarrhea stage. The diarrhea stage occurs because there's a brain and gut connection. I was having diarrhea 4 to 5 times a day. So much so, I called it RWing. I call it rewiping because the diarrhea was persistent and a voracious quality. My gut was constantly in turmoil. So much so, I would RW, and then I'm like, what is going on?
What? It would be the same volume. I would wipe and it wouldn't go away. There'd still be constant diarrhea. It's that bad. I was like, what the fuck is happening, dude? I would wipe again. Same volume. The same volume of diarrhea. And it would be endless. At this point, I am in a frantic, stressful mess. And one night, approximately 3 weeks after this, 4 or 5 weeks probably after the sexual assault, I called the police to come to my apartment to report this crazy cyber terrorism. And when I would make phone calls, it would go to the cyber terrorist instead of like a cyber terrorist hotline. And they would basically speak to me in a very sardonic and cruel way. Police come to my apartment and instantly isolate me and bring me to a room, the same criminal tactics that are being utilized against me. And prior to them getting to my apartment, all these people are stalking me around my apartment. And I go to this coffee shop next to my apartment, and there's a guy on a computer, and I look at his computer, it's a black screen. Like if you Google cyber terrorism, it's like the goofy, it looks like cryptic Egyptian writing. It looks like hieroglyphic writing on a black screen. You're like, that is illegal. Whatever he's doing is illegal. But the police anyways take me to a room, and next thing you know, I'm being strapped to a gurney in an ambulance and taken to a psychiatric unit. I'm freaking the fuck out. I remember calling my dad. I don't know what the fuck is what is happening? Why are they doing this to me? Why are the police now abusing me? I didn't know what the fuck was going on. So I go to the psychiatric unit, and it was pretty standard. They go, okay, you were sexually assaulted. And okay, just don't communicate with the hackers. And that's about it. Easier said than done, because you want your life back. And I get out of the psychiatric unit, and this is the beginning of an endless battle between good and evil. I apologize for the RW story, but it's pertinent. There is a diarrhea stage, and it lasted 5 months. Anyways, I get out of the psychiatric unit, and here we go. So upon release of my first psychiatric unit, I was provided aftercare appointments to deal with the post-traumatic stress of being sexually assaulted. What happened during my first aftercare appointment was I noticed I couldn't find the building I was supposed to go to in Allentown, Pennsylvania. My directions were hacked. I got out of my truck. I couldn't find the place. Trucks, vans, and cars, and people pointing directed me back to Bethlehem to 35 Elizabeth Avenue. And upon getting into the parking lot, I noticed a sign with my sexual assailant's partial phone number. This sign read 484-553, and the last four were numbers not related to her number. Why is this important? Well, number one, I thought maybe I should go here. I don't know what's happening. This is called plausible deniability. It's not the phone number, but in your brain, you make the connection that maybe I'm supposed to be here. And I was, but not for the right reasons. I never made an appointment with 35 Elizabeth Ave, but what happens is going to shock you. Once I parked in the spot that I was directed to go with the sexual assailant's partial phone number, I came into 35 Elizabeth Avenue. Upon entry of this strange building, I see Healing Path Psychology. Why this one stood out to me is because Instagram accounts were reaching out to me utilizing a similar name. It wasn't Healing Path Psychology, however, it was connected different psychological accounts. Again, it wasn't directly related for deniable plausibility. These are the tactics the predators utilize, because if you say this account was directly related, there will be evidence. These predators don't want to be caught. As I'm walking up the stairs in 35 Elizabeth Ave, I see this electrical box open and a large handwritten note
stating radiation harming people in a medical lab. Now, why this is significant? Because upon seeing that handwritten note and reading it in the back of my head, I suspect that people are being harmed in this building, creating a psychological effect that amplifies the emotions that are going through my mind and body and having a physical psychosomatic response to, in addition to the sexual assault, in addition to all the death threats, in addition to the stalking. This is by design. Again, these predators don't want to be caught, and they want you to appear as if you are insane, crazy, and they want your emotional reactions to be as big as they possibly can, because if you have large emotional reactions, you appear to be unstable. But the truth is, you are simply responding to environmental stimuli. So I make it up now, the second floor in 35 Elizabeth Avenue, in this healing path psychology. Upon entry, a strange woman greets me and says, "Have you seen the signs? Have you seen the signs? I think you're supposed to be here." I didn't have an appointment. I'd never been in this building, and I certainly did not know the lady. She wanted me to stay and asked me if I had my phone on me. I said, "No, I don't." She smiled. It's called duper's delight. They can't help themselves. They have a physical reaction to fooling people. Without a phone, she knew that I wasn't able to call the police or record the conversation. After leaving Healing Path Psychology at 35 Elizabeth Avenue in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, I see Pride Abstract Group. But there's a huge handwritten sign that says, "Do it with pride," as if that meant something. At the time, it was supposed to elicit a reaction to confuse me. If you're not going to stay here, you can do it by yourself. But good luck. Do it with pride. So it's not certain to me whether the terroristic, narcissistic, sadistic pedophile group utilized 35 Elizabeth Avenue for a distraction and ambiguous setup to essentially make me believe that this building and offices in it were utilized to harm individuals. Again, seeing the parking space with the partial number of the sexual assailant, seeing a Healing Path Psychology sign when other psychological Instagrams were messaging me. These are ambiguous tactics utilized by this terroristic organization because there's plausible deniability. Whether or not they hijacked these offices, I don't know till this day. However, what they did was effective, and when I left, I was directed to the Bethlehem Cemetery. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in historic Bethlehem's finest cemetery. Why this is significant is because I was brought to this very cemetery after 35 Elizabeth Avenue. And ladies and gentlemen, I am standing on top of the spot where I had sex with the sexual assailant, terrorist, and abuser in a public location. Why? So, this is very important. Predators will use new environment. New environment elicits the novelty response. This will make people addicted to the sex because, wow, I'm in a public spot. I'm not supposed to be doing this. And there's a fear component. So the human brain tricks your emotions. There's so much fear and adrenaline. It must be because of this terrorist, psychopath woman. At the time, you go, it must be because of this beautiful woman. I'm obsessed with her now because my brain's confusing adrenaline and fear response with attraction. This is documented in psychiatric literature, and human traffickers and predators know this significant detail. Ladies and gentlemen, as I'm cruising and walking through this beautiful historic cemetery, after 35 Elizabeth Ave, after seeing the same gravestone in which I had intercourse on, I am feeling confused, shocked, I felt hurt. I felt extremely disoriented. I see a homeless man walking up to me. However, when he approached me, he wasn't homeless, but wearing a costume, and then offers me cigarettes. Why is this significant? In between 35 Elizabeth Ave and the cemetery, my cigarettes were stolen from my truck. And homeless people ask you for a cigarette. They don't come up to you with 4 cigarettes. You want a cigarette. It's strange and it's confusing, and it's a psychological tactic used to confuse you. As we're walking, he's pointing at gravestones, say, check this out. Lehigh University does a great job with the cemetery, and there's a Halloween effect during the October months. And the cemetery looks spooky, and there's a bunch of special effects. These special effects were utilized on that day I was in this cemetery. And he brings me to this specific gravestone, which says, brothers forever, never forgotten. And why this is significant is because I lost my brother to a fentanyl overdose January 18th, 2016. The tactic here was to scare me. He said, you're going to see him real soon, and pointed at me in a very authoritative tone. This completely scared me. I said, what am I supposed to do next? And he brings me over to the Union Shop right next to the Bethlehem Police Station. So now, after leaving the beautiful and historic cemetery in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, I arrive at the United Steelworkers of America Union Shop right next to the Bethlehem Police Department. This is in downtown Bethlehem. Upon entering this Union Shop, there are confusing handwritten notes. One says the jewelers is downstairs, go upstairs. I'm walking around this whole building. Where the fuck am I supposed to go? And my best thinking said to trust the hobo in this state of mind. Why? Because earlier in the morning, these terrorists broke into my house and wrote death dates of everyone in my family. I had a book with my family's birthdays. They wrote death dates. I'm thinking they're going to kill me. They're going to kill my family. My amygdala is at a hyperactive state. It produces fear response. Sexual assault increases that. And during this stressful and confusing time, my cortisol is overwhelming my body. My hands are shaking. Everything in my body says, trust these people. Do not die. Period. So upon walking back and forth, I go into this building and I'm greeted by Bob Brooks, politician advocates. And they tell me, you got to go in this room. But first, read this sign. And it says, take everything out of your pockets and do not touch the agents. No sudden movements. So I complied. I didn't know what it meant. And I took everything out of my pockets. Why? Because there's a novelty effect in new environments. I didn't know how to respond or behave in a new environment. So I complied. And upon coming out of this secluded room, I find my wallet has been stolen in a sophisticated, stupid, confusing situation. Upon leaving this cemetery and going to the Union Shop, I'm then directed to go to a church in Southside Bethlehem, where I'm greeted by a blue-haired woman who says, you belong, and here's your volunteering sheet you need to sign up for. So then I comply with that too. I'm like, I don't want to die. Don't kill me. I'm confused at what to do. And these predators utilize new environment so they can coerce and manipulate you with ease. If it was a designation or location I was familiar with, I would have told them to fuck off. But since it's a new environment, I complied. It's that strange. There's a novelty effect with new environment. Again, sex in a new location. A weird hobo guy I've never seen before. Going to the Union Shop, confusing handwritten notes. Now they're telling me to take everything out of my pockets and comply or else. Then going to the church. It's all manipulation to make me appear unstable and to rob me in the process. So after the church, I go back to my apartment, and all I can think about is protecting my girlfriend's safety. And since I didn't have a phone, we started communicating through covert methods, which meant I would go into her upstairs window through an escape ladder. It's very strange when you have a normal relationship and out of nowhere you are scared for your life and her safety. She didn't understand what was happening. So I come over to her apartment and I'm trying to keep myself safe and her safe. I haven't showered in a few days since the cyber attacks. I didn't feel safe at my house. So I come over to her apartment, and at this point, she's had enough. We end up calling the police. And when the police get there, I'm trying to explain, you don't understand what's happening. You couldn't possibly understand the stress I'm under. There's a terrorist organization. And they said, we're gonna take you back to a psychiatric unit. And I said, I just went through this. They know I've been hacked. They know everything I'm saying is pretty much legitimate. Going there would be a waste of time. You guys have to protect me. So luckily, there's a person I trusted from my high school. I went to high school with one of the police officers who's a very solid human being. I respect him. I played sports with him when I was younger. I know he's a solid person who's probably has more morals than I do. He allows me to leave. As I'm leaving to go to another residency to sleep for the night, I get slammed and rear-ended, and then I got in a car accident. Now, I got rear-ended by a stalker who was way too close to me. And this accident occurred just outside the city limits in Bethlehem Township. And he was going about 40 miles an hour, ran into my truck, and my neck was killing me. So the next stop, unfortunately, for me, was the Anderson St. Luke's campus, where the biggest plot twist of this story starts. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm outside the St. Luke's Anderson campus trauma center in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Prior to arrival, I was in an accident. I was also robbed of all my money, and basically I drove around Bethlehem in this weird maze, horror maze, and I ran out of gas on the highway. I walked here. My neck is in severe pain. And when I get in, the security guard is the same person who walked me and provided a horror tour of the cemetery. His name's Vincent, and he's no longer in costume. He's in a security uniform at the St. Luke's Anderson Campus Trauma Center. He immediately targets me and tells Dr. Quayle that I'm giving him a hard time and that I am not making sense, tangential thought, and I'm in psychosis. I said, I was in a car accident. Dr. Quayle and the security guard corner me and say, we're going to have to get him some Valium and Haldol. I take off running, and I'm stopped by hospital employees that say, you can't get out that way. And they bring me to my emergency room where I see a state trooper. I go, you have to listen to me. I was in an accident. There's a terrorist group. Please help me. And the doctors then play it off as if I'm nuts. And why this is so manipulative and scary is because it's actually happening. And no one will believe that there's a cyber terroristic stalking organization that's claiming I'm unstable. No one will believe that. No one believes me yet. The Bethlehem Police don't. And I'm immediately provided with Valium, and the security guard makes me drink an entire cup of ginger ale, which was laced with Haldol, an antipsychotic medication. So I'm given an extraordinary amount of value for no reason by Dr. Quayle. Not to mention, they don't know what medications I'm on. They just instantly give me value. This is medically malpractice. It's insane. It could have killed me. The combination of Valium and Halodol put me in a comatose state where they were able to do whatever they wanted to me and no one could say a word and I couldn't respond. It's medical malpractice, and then I end up strapped to a gurney and taken to Lee Heighton's psychiatric ward due to the malpractice of Dr. Quayle and the security guard Vincent, who's dressing up and stalking me throughout Bethlehem. The twist is when I get to the Lee Heighton psychiatric unit, Dr. Quayle on record says I showed up in hospital socks, I was never in an accident, and that I'm in complete psychosis. Not to mention, he states on record that my truck was in the middle of the highway. This scared me to death because we have an affidavit from the tow truck driver stating my truck was on the side of the road. I had pictures during the accident wearing shoes. I'm taking a photograph of an insurance card. My shoes were on. I was not wearing hospital socks. And lastly, I showed up because I was in a truck accident. I was rear-ended. And then I got in a car accident. The point is, everything was upside down. The entire story was a lie by a professional doctor. When I get to Lee Heighton's psychiatric unit, what was waiting for me there is beyond human conception. The patients at this facility were there to stalk me, gaslight me, and convince Dr. McCarthy at the Lee Heighton psychiatric unit that I have mental illness. At the same time, AI voice recognition software is calling in pretending they're my mom. So I'm having conversations with terrorists with voice recognition software claiming that they're my mom. And I tell the doctor this, and they have a fake trial, essentially, with fake evidence claiming that I am unstable. And they take away my constitutional right to bear arms, and I'm trapped in this facility for 20 days while I'm being held down and forced injected with Zyprexa, which is a antipsychotic drug, where I was so debilitated. I don't even know how to describe the feeling. It felt like I was being drugged with like Benadryl. I collapsed, and I had to actually get transported. I wake up on an ambulance, and I'm so incoherent. I get to a hospital, and my mom said to me that my tongue was out of my mouth, like that, and that's really psychologically scarring. My family then comes to this emergency room where I'm held after being forcibly injected with Zyprexa for God knows why. I don't know why. I showed up to St. Luke's Anderson for a truck accident. So these lies are now compounding, and I'm basically smeared as an unstable person with schizophrenia. I didn't know what to do. I told my dad, I guess I'll go to the state police and turn myself in for all of this. Like, if it's on my phone, I just want it to end. I would rather go to jail. I remember having that conversation. But instead, we decided to go to a rehabilitation program for drugs and alcohol because I started drinking heavily, and I got prescribed Ativan for severe panic attacks, which is a benzodiazepine. That's extremely hard. It's extraordinarily hard to get off of it. The amount of stress I was under, I was eating these pills in which relieve anxiety. So I became dependent on the pills. And the first rehab I go to, I'm being abused there. They somehow stalked my location to to this drug and rehabilitation program, I leave there, in which my parents pick me up and they don't know what to do, so they send me to another one. Now I'm at another facility, and then people start pouring in to a drug and alcohol detox center in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And this is the biggest part of this story, because a veteran decided to help me. And I'm extremely grateful for this person. At the end of this abusive, confusing drug and alcohol detox, I write a hand note with evidence about people abusing me inside the medical facility. And I get transported to another facility where I was housed outside the facility in a sober living type environment. Here I was hacked. Meanwhile, it's a psychological psyop to get me to a place of basically to isolate me and then abuse me at this place until I commit suicide. I didn't know this at the time. So they're hacking my laptop, stealing my chargers, and this is when the theft, the criminal behavior really escalates. The stalking escalates. It's terrifying, and I get transported to another facility. And the medical staff don't know what to do. They never encountered this situation before. So they send me to a mental health facility. And to spare the details of how I was helped by law enforcement, I had the first sign of relief of like, there are people recognizing this, and there could be a future, so don't commit suicide. I wanted to end what was happening to me. And because of this notion I obtained, I didn't do that. And I'm grateful I didn't. I'm extremely grateful I didn't.
There is a fog rolling in, resembling something of sin. Let's begin. Even a psychopath in a mess will be beautifully dressed up until your death. And she is a pretty good actress, and that is a pretty gross mattress. The tag removed and burned with matches. And the fact is, for every poker lie and poker disguise, there's a gun under the table that satisfies a battle between good and evil that is endless. So let's end this.
So in the beginning of this documentary, I claimed that I was doing this for other victims of this terrorist organization. And that's partially true. What happened after I received the notion of being helped, these stalking terrorists did not stop stalking me. So I went to over 20 facilities to try and receive therapy. And why I did this, I found this out through the process. My family has no idea. This is going to be shocking to my family members. I still have not received therapy. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to start dealing with it, with everything. So, I found that this out doing this documentary. There's so much that has happened to me, and as a survival mechanism, I pushed everything down, and it's impossible to explain how these organizations work unless you see it chronologically. So, these are doctors. These are security guards. These are people you see in everyday life, and there's a lot of child abuse. By the way, if someone says to you, we're going to put child pornography on your phone, that's someone who has child pornography on their phone. Plain and simple, these people are pedophiles. These people are disgusting terrorists, and they want a total system collapse. They want to destroy America. They want to destroy communities, and they want to destroy children because it makes them feel elated and powerful. I fought as hard as I could. I put everything on the table. I was 2 feet in on trying to destroy this organization, and I ended up using the tactics I learned from them back on them. So when they would do the psyops, when they would try and get me for sexual, they claimed I did all this gross stuff to people at these mental facilities. And how you respond to that simply is you never defend yourself, and you try and get with people you trust. Get with people that are doing the right thing, and stand your ground. You stand your ground, and you don't let them take an inch, because they will take a mile. It starts incrementally. Pedophile, we have to rewrite these words. These child attracted minor, all these gross fucking words is a catastrophe. What a pedophile is destroys a child's life. It takes the innocence away from a child. It's just unfathomable. And I can imagine the law enforcement that even witnesses a crime scene or an investigation of this manner has a difficult time surviving afterwards. Because once you see the evil, you cannot unsee it. It could be 1 out of 100, 1 out of 200, but maybe you see 100 people in your day as you go to the grocery store. And these people could be anywhere. It could be your neighbors, like they said to me. So there's what happened is I have a life sentence essentially with living with this information, living with this post-traumatic stress disorder. They didn't get me. They didn't make me commit suicide, but I am serving a sentence to some degree because of this sadistic, terroristic, pedophilic organization. I'm getting the word out. And that's it. There's no great way to end this. But fuck you. Fuck you all. I hope you all get what's coming to you. Because it is.
So it's written, pay attention and listen. Think it's too cold to go outside in these lives. With psychological projection, avoidance and deflection, borderline, oh my, oh my. The Machiavellian plays games, the narcissistic persuades, and the sadist is laughing at every phrase. Watch out for the victim, psychopaths or by definition, and wolves will wear sheep's clothes and cashmere. Oh dear. Psychological projection, avoidance and deflection, a borderline, oh my, oh my. The Machiavellian plays games, the narcissistic persuades, and the sadist is loud.